raw materials like gold, cocoa, bauxite, iron, and the rest of them, oil, you don't determine the price. The price is determined on the global market. And so I don't think what we need to do may be to increase our pricing. If we increase our pricing, I don't know how it will work. We can only increase pricing on the semi-finished and finished products that we export in terms of chocolate and the rest of them. For that one, we can increase prices to get more, as it were, export revenue. However, if you look at it critically, there is an import duty tariff on what you are exporting. Now, once there is tariff on what you're exporting, if you increase your price, then it will make it much more expensive for those who will be buying in the United States. And so I don't think our strategy will be to increase the price.
I see. All right. We'll break that down a bit more. But you are about mentioning other reasons why we are vulnerable to these tariffs.
Very well. The other one has to do with the fact that we also export things like shea butter, fruit juice, palm oil, and the rest of them to the United States. You know, shea butter, fruit juice, and palm oil are not raw materials. They are products that have been processed. So when such agricultural goods, which have been processed, are exported, they are now going to cost higher. And Ghana is not the only country that is, as it were, exporting processed agricultural products to the United States. And for such products, the price is not set by someone. You set your price. And that is where the competition is even experienced the more. So if another country is bringing a similar product at a different price than yours, and there's a 10% tariff on both of you, then you can see how this is going to go. And so that is another reason. Our vulnerability to the United States is essentially based on our trade relationship with them. And our trade essentially is on our raw materials, it's on our products that our processed products that we export, and then also on our textile and apparel that we also export to the United States. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, it allows some duty-free export to the United States. However, these new tariffs undercut those benefits, and it will make our textiles more expensive on the United States market.
I think you're moving a bit too fast. Maybe you should slow down a bit so we can get
a
full grasp of what you say.
What didn't you get? Because
no, I got it, but maybe you should just slow down a bit.
Okay. The United States accounts for over $700 million in annual trade with Ghana. And so any decline in trade could have major implications for employment, for government revenue, and subsequently our economic stability. And let me explain that. Once our things cost more and the demand for them fall, it means that we'll not be getting the revenue we expect to get from those exports because they are not being purchased, and so you will not get revenue. There's no demand for it. Once there is no demand for it and you are the manufacturer here in Ghana, the products that you export to the United States are not seeing a high demand. What do you have to do? You may want to reduce what you are producing. You may want to reduce the price. You may want to lay off some of your workers because you may not have enough revenue to be able to pay your workers. And that is what I mean by it's also going to have implications for employment because workers may be laid off as a result of the fall in demand, which affects the profitability of these companies that manufacture these products. And once that is happening, government is losing revenue, there are negative implications for employment. The real effect will be experienced in the level of our economic stability, which is a function of our exports, because our GDP includes the difference between our exports and our imports.
I see, but now let's focus a bit on how it economically impacts us really. I want to know, how would these tariffs affect Ghanaian businesses and industries?
All right. You know, the impact is felt in multiple ways. And it is important for us to understand that the impact is not one way and it affects many things. The first impact, maybe if you could even glean from what I was explaining earlier, is that we are going to see the U.S. buyers facing higher costs. Some may switch to alternative suppliers like Cote d'Ivoire, Indonesia, and South America. But I'm even saying that is not going to happen. It is not going to happen because these other countries are not exempt from these tariffs. They are also going to experience the 10% tariff. Are we
yes,
together?
Yeah.
Yes, they are also going to experience it. So the real thing is that our Ghanaian cocoa farmers may experience lower farm gate prices, and that is going to reduce their incomes. And that is one of the clear incidences of this tariff that we can speak about. And more specifically, the cocoa processing companies that export chocolate, cocoa butter, and powder to the U.S., they face reduced demand and lower profit because of the spike in the prices. And that is a major thing that we need to pay attention to. It's a major effect of these tariffs on our Ghanaian business.
So there will be a reduction in the demand for those products.
Yes, and that will affect the profitability of these companies or the specific industries.
I see. All right, continue.
All right. Then the other one, I was saying that the situation is also true for the rest of the industries, like the textiles and the apparel industry. You see, it is not cotton thread that we export to the United States. It is the clothing that we've already put together, as it were. And like I'm saying, for those ones, you determine the pricing. And so if you do not evaluate your pricing strategy and, as it were, modify it in line with what is currently happening, what you provide to the United States market by way of export in terms of textiles and apparel may be relatively expensive compared to another country that may be offering same at a lower price. And that will also come and affect such industries like the textiles and apparel industry. And maybe some may not understand, but this is important because it may not be everyone that it will affect, because not every industry in Ghana really exports to the United States. It is on the very sensitive ones that we are touching on. Shea butter processors and fruit exporters, fruit juice exporters as well. They will also have their fair share of this. And so all I'm saying is that there should be a clear strategy by these companies as a response to these tariffs. And the strategy should be on their pricing, because now the original cost, their baseline cost, will go up. If we export fruit juice to the United States, let's say $10 per 1 kg. I don't know, it's fruit juice measured in kilogram or meter cube. Milligram, milliliters. Okay. So let's say $10 per 1 liter. Is that okay? Because of the 10% tariff, it is now going to be $11 per liter, because 10% of the 10 is 1, and you need to add that 1 back to the $10 for you to get $11. And that is what a liter will now be selling for. And so you need to find a way to price what you export now to the United States market, so that when your fruit juice goes onto the market, it can compete with other fruit juices from other countries. See, there are lots of things that affect consumers' demand for a product, and key amongst them is price. Someone may be in love with your product. Someone may love MTN, but because the cost of data goes up, they will switch from MTN and go to Airtel Tigo, although they may not be in love with Airtel Tigo. Pricing affects demand, and that is a very key thing that we must take into consideration. And then finally, aluminium exports and the rest of them are also going to experience some slowdown.
I see. Now, how will the tariffs affect the everyday Ghanaian consumer, like you and I?
Please take that again.
No, I'm asking that how will the tariffs affect the everyday Ghanaian consumer?
Well, because of the effect on the businesses, it will trickle down, of course, to the everyday Ghanaian consumer. If demand for, say, shea butter, say, fruit juice that is exported from Ghana to the United States falls, that is going to affect that company's profit. Once it affects them, one of the things companies typically would do will be to cut down their labor force. And so there may be some job losses in the country. They are going to experience that as a result of the tariff. So you see, it may not be direct, but look at the pass-through effect. It's going through the first impact on the company, what the strategy of the company will be. Is it to reduce labor, change their pricing strategy, among other things. Once they want to cut down on labor, then some people may be losing their jobs in not every job, but the jobs around these export sectors. Now, if the businesses pass the increased cost onto the consumers, then food and everyday products could also become more expensive. And that would also have an impact on the Ghanaian consumers by reducing their real wage. I mean, this is inflation. It could lead to inflationary pressures. And certainly, it could also have an impact on our foreign exchange or the depreciation or appreciation of our currency. And in this case, it's depreciation. Once you are not earning more from export revenue, holding your imports constant, if your export is reducing, your CD is on the path of depreciation. It's likely to depreciate because now you'll be importing more than exporting, and the difference will be negative on your book, and so your currency will depreciate. Not only that, not only are you going to face a depreciating currency, you're also going to have a situation where you are going to have a trade deficit. You are going to have a trade deficit, and that must be paid attention to.
Right, very, very interesting. So, are you saying we should expect some cedi depreciation in the coming days?
Need to repeat that again.
No, I'm asking whether we should expect, I mean, based on the last point that you made, I'm asking whether we should expect some cedi depreciation in the coming days.
No. I expect Ghana to bring a strategy in response to this. Of course, even these effects, they may not happen. It depends on what the strategies of these companies are, the strategy of the country is. If we see no response, we need to monitor the market and see how things are going to go for a while before we can now try to, as it were, see if there is a clear connection between what is happening there and the strength of our currency. Because if at the end of the day, our export revenue is going to be more than our import revenue, import losses, as it were, then how do we make the point for that? So that necessarily must be obvious. There must be evidence to buttress that before we can make that case. But as we say, we cannot just say because of the tariffs, Ghana's cedi will depreciate. It will depreciate if all the things that we have said happen and nothing is done from the policy front, nothing is done by the organizations in question or the export sector.
I see. So essentially, it will be based on the response that we are giving to this particular.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. No, but what exactly, as an economist, what exactly do you think the Ghanaian government must do to counter the negative effects of these tariffs?
Exemption. What do I mean by that? We have the diplomatic call. Let's engage with them so that some key export items, especially the raw material, they need cocoa. They need cocoa beans for their industry. The United States is not known for cocoa beans. They are not known for that. We know them for something else. We are known for cocoa beans. We need to negotiate with them for an exemption on some of these commodities, like cocoa beans, that should not experience the tariff, so that we can comfortably earn our revenues from there. And then also for them to uphold the AGOA Act that we have with them. That also must be enforced. Must be a thing. And then we need to strengthen our ties with other trading blocs like European Union, China, Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the rest of them. What do I mean by that? The United States is not the only place to export. You can export to other places who will offer you the same thing without imposing a tariff on you. If you still want to gain or get your export revenue, if you engage them and they are not ready to exempt you, then you have to limit what you export to them and export it to elsewhere that you will get your revenue. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
That is the first thing that we ought to do. And maybe government must also support some of these industries that goes into the manufacture of some of the products that may not be exempted or that will suffer these tariffs. Because if it's going to be affecting their profitability, then they may need some sort of tax relief to be able to cushion them, to give them some strength, so that the fall in their profits or maybe even, but I don't want to say losses. I'm not a prophet of doom, but the fall in their profits would not have an adverse implication on them. And maybe more specifically, let me come back to the point. We need to boost regional trade through AFTA. We need to expand trade with Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and other African nations to reduce our dependence on these foreign markets. Once we strengthen local manufacturing, we'll be able to increase intra-African trade. That is what is missing, the missing link. Let's deal with it, and then we'll be able to respond fairly to them.
But isn't that a long-term solution to what is happening?
It is, but AFTA is already in town, and there are already engagements ongoing. I don't think we should say it is a long-term any longer. Once we start working on it, we'll reap the dividends in the long run, but it is good for us now. See, what I see is that a time is coming that if Africa does not find a way to relate with itself better, that like it does with the rest of the world, Africa is going to really suffer for it. We've already started suffering for it. We just saw the United States withdraw USAID from every country, including Ghana. Well, of course, some of us have our arguments for why foreign aid is not what will really bring development to you. There are a lot of scholars who make such arguments and for which we agree with, because in fact, we've seen a lot of foreign aid. What have we seen? We've not really seen much in terms of our development. Our development is not dependent on the foreign aid we receive. That is one thing. And we know in the literature, unless that is intercepted by strong, as we call it, governance systems. Is that okay?
Yeah.
We need strong governance structures. Institutional quality is really the term for it. Once we don't have that, and these monies come, they may be misappropriated, and that is why we will not see development. So it is not just aid that will bring it. We need to man our own development. That is what Africa needs to do. And one of the ways for us to do that is to be able to trade amongst ourselves. It's not just about the trade. It's also about our common currency and all of that. Once we look within and develop within, I tell you, the rest of the world cannot reckon with us because we have whatever we need to be able to develop. We have the raw materials. We have them. And I think it is something we must do. And finally, what the main government will do in terms of policy to stabilize the economic situation is also key. What the monetary side will do, Bank of Ghana will do to be able to stabilize the city. When we make the argument for how a reduction in our exports, giving the same import level or increasing imports, could depreciate the city, then central banks must respond with policies that can stabilize the city and prevent excessive currency depreciation, because that will not be good for us.
I see. Now let's pay attention. I mean, let's turn our attention to Ghanaian businesses. How do you think Ghanaian businesses should adapt to these tariffs?
And I think Hidatu alluded to that. You don't just sell to the United States market. There are a lot of markets all over the world who may have better trade arrangements with you. China, Middle East, Africa, the rest of them. Reduce your over-reliance on the U.S. by securing some regional buyers, some buyers in Asia, and the rest of them. And I think that you will just be fine. You should be just fine. And we should now move towards local value addition as well. Moving from raw export to finished and semi-finished products is key for us to be able to, as it were, adapt to these tariffs, as we put it. That will make us competitive. We do something that is unique. We put something on the market that we have control over the price, and we are able to maneuver our way around it. We are able to re-strategize, to be able to stay afloat the changing dynamics. And that is very, very essential. And maybe we should identify some cheaper production inputs so that we are able to optimize the supply chain and reduce our dependency on expensive imports. Because for some of the things that we do or manufacture, we import some of the things we use in the manufacturing process from the U.S. and the rest of them. And so we need to look at cheaper options in order to fully optimize the supply chain for us to reap the gain.
Right. I'm sure there's something we need to do, I mean, in terms of government and private sector collaboration, isn't it?
Government and the private sector should essentially come together to push for stronger trade agreements with our global partners. And we should also advocate for special economic zones with tariff relief. You know, in Ghana, for instance, you know the free zones. Free zones is not an issue of a place, but it's one of these arrangements where the companies within the free zones are not taxed at all. They are not. They unless they sell to the Ghanaian market, then they'll be taxed at the same rate. But for export reasons, they enjoy some tax relief and the rest of them. So some of these things we must advocate for same, push for same, and ensure we are able to achieve that.
Well, I'm going to come to you on how the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFTA, has positioned itself to, has positioned Ghana to respond to these tariffs. But before that, let's examine some of our trade policies and the preparedness. Do you think that we anticipated these tariffs, and could the government have done something to prepare ahead of it?
I don't think we anticipated it. I've not seen Ghana in the literature of trade wars. I've not seen Ghana FITA yet. Usually these things are among the big players. You don't see a lot of it in our region. So I don't think we had a clue or we expected such things. In fact, I think 2 months ago, our conversation was on, or a month ago, our conversation was on, 2 months ago, how the U.S. was imposing some tariffs, is it on Canada?
Yeah.
Little did we know they were going to come to the rest of the world. So it's not something that we anticipated. But like I'm saying, we need a strong trade strategy and an economic diversification plan that could help reduce our vulnerability. The shocks from the external global economy have largely impacted the African region. They transmit in many ways, and trade is one of the ways they transmit. How are we able to have good shock absorbance? That's really the trade strategies I'm calling for. Such that some of these shocks will do little to nothing to us. When you are extremely vulnerable to a country, any change in their policy actually affects you.
Right.
It's like being vulnerable to another human being. Anything they do largely may either hurt you or make you happy because, we are vulnerable to them. We are exposed to them. And so it is not an issue of merely closing the exposure. Of course, vulnerability comes with its own benefits. But on the side where we could be hugely impacted in the downward direction, then I think we need a strategy that will help us. And we need to strengthen, one, our trade relations with Africa, Europe, and Asian markets so that it is not as though we are heavily reliant on the United States market alone. Once we are well diversified across the global market, and then it means that the same thing should be happening across all the markets in the world for us to experience the impact. But once you are well diversified, U.S. may be treating you unfairly, permit me to use that way. But the European market may be treating you fairly. China may be treating you fairly. So you will see that you are losing here, but you are gaining elsewhere. And the net effect may be a positive balance. And that is one of the things that we need to do. And we need strong investment in our local manufacturing. See, we import from the United States, and it is something that we must not run away from. We are talking about tariffs, and it is on our exports. But another side of it is that we have a trade relationship with them also, not because we just export to them, but also because we import from them.
Right.
And a way for you to reduce that vulnerability is to do your import substitution very well. What are you importing from the United States? You have the manpower to be able to manufacture that in your own country. What is stopping you from doing that? We need to start looking within, add value to our raw products, manufacture them for our market. Nigeria has stopped importing rice. They took a decision. Ghana, we still import rice. And the names keep changing year after year. When I was little, I used to know of Uncle Sam rice, Chicago Stars, Texas, and the rest of those kind of rice.
Yeah.
Today, that is not even what we find on the market. We find other foreign kinds of rice on our market. Why? I've always said it. When the desirable is not available, the available must become desirable for the Ghanaian people. We need to take a decision as a country on some of these things and we need to be able to manufacture them within and consume them.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I lost you for a few minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
At what point?
I don't think I heard the last thing you said.
I don't know the last but one I said, so I don't know what point you lost me. So maybe what I was talking about when you lost me, so that I continue from there.
Yeah, you were talking about we strengthening our trade relations with Africa, Europe, and the Asian markets.
Okay.
And then I think the last thing I heard you say really was how we need to invest in local manufacturing.
Right. And I was saying that because we import from these foreign markets. Once you're importing from foreign markets, what that will mean is that it is something we don't have here that we are importing. And that also makes us vulnerable to them. How do you cut that off? You need to be able to manufacture that locally so that your vulnerability to them by way of import is also reduced. Otherwise, you have a relationship with them that is two-way. It is not just export, but also import. And both of them has to be managed. That was really the last point that I was making.
All right. Okay. Now let's come to the after conversation. Now I want us to focus on that a bit because that's something that we were trying to do as a continent to be able to, as it were, stand against some of these shocks from other countries. I want to know how the after is positioned Ghana to respond to some of these tariffs.
Very well. I think that for after, well, it is going to deepen intra-African trade. I mean, that's the first point that I would want to make. Once intra-African trade is enhanced, reliance on, other countries would not be something that we'll be looking at. So we are going to see intra-African trade being enhanced. Ghanaian companies can shift their focus to regional markets in Africa. And that makes us vulnerable to Africa than to the rest of the world. That is the first thing. And it will, once that happens, it has a by effect. It would also reduce our reliance on the Western economies. You know, the trade agreement promotes African self-sufficiency. That is what the trade agreement seeks to achieve. And once we do that, our reliance on the Western economies, including the United States, is going to reduce. And it is also going to strengthen local production chains because now it's going to be a regional league, an African league. And where does Ghana want to be on that league table? It is going to be competitive within the region. And you need to work hard to be able to win the African premiership in terms of trade, in terms of Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And that is one of the things that I'm excited about it. We have serious infrastructure and logistical barriers. That is really one of the reasons why the full implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has delayed. And we must therefore invest in transportation, energy, digital infrastructure to be able to maximize some of these benefits. I tell you this, it is easier for you to export goods from Ghana to the United States than for you to move it from Ghana to somewhere South Africa or within Africa. Africa spends less in trading with the rest of the world than it spends in trading amongst itself. That is a major challenge. We need to restructure our entire transport system and the rest of them. That infrastructure deficit must be dealt with. Africa itself must invest in transportation to be able to ensure that it will cost us cheaper to move goods from Ghana to the rest of the African countries than it costs us to move goods from Ghana to the United States. You see, if it costs you, a company, say company A, more to move goods to Benin than it costs you to move goods to the United States, you are dealing in trade. Would you want to incur more cost in moving your goods than you want to incur less cost? That is one of the reasons why Africa trades with the rest of the world. And that is what they did. They connected us to themselves and they connected us amongst one another. So we don't even talk to one another, but we talk to them very often. And that is not good. As a family, as a household, we need to be able to trade amongst ourselves than we trade with the rest of the world.
And that should be the focus, I believe.
That should be the focus.
Right. Okay. Maybe we're trying to wrap up. Let's finalize. Maybe you may want to share your final thoughts, and then we can end here?
Very well. We've had a lot of conversation. I don't even know what to use for my final thought. But maybe let me just say on after, because that's what we are ending with. We need to tap into that full potential. In addition to that, some of these structural issues have to be dealt with. And I want to show you something. One of the things that I think is happening to Africa that we must quickly